To apply, and we can answer more questions on this later, but to apply, you go to corofellowship.org. I'm sure many of you have seen the website so far, but the application due date is coming up really soon, January 18th. So you have a week to get those things in. Feel free to ask questions about that as well. And we can talk more about that. We're going to jump right in right now to the alumni perspective. So I want to hear from both of you. What brought you to Coro? Go ahead, take it away.
So I think what brought me to Coro and what I really wound up loving about it was I think there's like two things that make the program really unique and made it really special in terms of my own experience. One was just the breadth of experiences you get to have. Like I've never seen another program or heard of another program where you get to cycle through so many different experiences and learn so much about so many different sectors and types of people and types of issues and problems. It all sort of jammed into a 9-month period. Like it's a very wide angle that Coro gives you, and I'm forever grateful for getting to have that type of experience. The second thing I'd say is the balance between experiential learning and more traditional classroom learning. Coro, I think, is primarily about experiential learning, which is also unique, but with a really strong component of training and process and synthesis of those experiences in sort of a structured environment with your peers that you're going through the program with. And so, I think really good experiential learning programs are uncommon, and even when they do exist, it's usually just experiential learning. And I think like the combo of those two things in the Coro model really is like an accelerant for your ability to learn how to understand problems, solve problems, push your own thinking, work in teams, etc.
Right. And what stage were you in your life when you chose Coro?
So I did Coro right after undergraduate. So I graduated in 2014 from Occidental College. So I was one of those kind of fresh out of school Coro people, I guess, when I applied. I didn't have anything else on the table. I put all my eggs in the Coro basket, which may or may not have been a good thing. But while at school, I was involved in a lot of student organizing, and I did a few political campaigns. And at the time when it came to applying for Coro, at least I knew in my mind that I wanted to experience something else. At least, if I've done these two things, where else can I make change? And that was kind of my guiding question coming into Coro was, where does Australia fit best? Like, where can Australia be most poised to make change? Through the course of Coro, that those are not the correct questions that I should have been asking. I came to a whole other set of questions that we can get into later. But at least at the very beginning, I was curious about where do I make change, and that kind of like opened up the door, wedged it open a little bit for I think me to be have a successful Coro experience. So I didn't have a career, no career. I didn't have anything to lose. No stakes for me.
So similarly, I actually also did Coro the year right after I graduated from college. But I think my class, it was pretty typical of most classes. So about half the class was fresh out of school, and about half the class, your class was similar, had a few years of work experience. And I think one thing it's important to know about programs that I think it works really well for both of those populations. I think like both of us found it an amazing first year of college experience, but certainly like my friends that I've like stayed in touch with over the years from my class and other classes, who had a few years work experience, also found it a tremendously valuable experience. And I'll say like I often look back on my Coro experience and think, oh, if I had done this a little more mid-career, it would have been a different type of experience in a really cool way. Like coming to the table with like more frameworks and experiences to sort of like put Coro on top of would have really enhanced the program. And I'm grateful I got to do it when I did.
Absolutely.
But
absolutely. I think people in the different stages get different things out of it, obviously, because they're coming from different perspectives. But it was really important to have a mix of young kids right out of school, maybe think that they know everything about the world, and you have different people along their career trajectories who want to enhance their careers, who want to totally jump ship and learn an entirely different skill. So it's a good mix of people, I think.
Right, and we asked this question specifically because a lot of people are looking at Coro at different points in their career, and we do that specifically to bring about diverse voices, because we know that these challenges that we're looking at in our community, it's important to have everyone looking at it from different perspectives. So thank you for those answers. Why are you glad you did the program in 5 words?
Five
Five
words,
words.
yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
Lots of fun and learning.
Adaptive capacity.
Yeah.
Two
That was
words.
such
There
a
you go.
smarter answer. That really.
So can you give us some insight into your day-to-day? So what does it look like to be a Coro Fellow on the ground, hitting it running?
Oh my gosh. It takes up a lot of time. That for Coro, it's your whole life. It's both, a full-time job plus some. And so, I remember there are days where you have 16, 17-hour days and you're working really late into the night. So that can be challenging on just how much time you're dedicating to this one program. But while you're in the placements, you're working a full work day at your placements, and then you either have seminars, dedicated synthesis reflection time with your other fellows. So that takes up a chunk of time, and there's other projects that you're working on with fellows, with outside stakeholders. So you're balancing all these different time, responsibilities. You're making decisions. You're always making your decisions. It's a lot to keep on one plate, but I think that is one of the things that I'm so glad that I did Coro, because coming out of the program now, I can handle all of those things much better at a much higher level with much more kind of clear-headedness than I did before.
Right. And can you describe one placement specifically that comes to mind?
Yeah, sure. So I think one thing that's to wrap up your answer that I loved about Coro personally is that no 2 days were ever alike, which is really nice. So a typical day in Coro is just not like any other typical day in Coro.
Yeah.
So I had a number of placements that I really loved. My government placement, I was at LA Community College, or LA City College, which is like the biggest community college in LA, I think, the oldest. My nonprofit placement was at the local NPR station, the biggest local NPR station in LA, KPCC.
I was at KCRW.
Oh, okay, yeah, we had a fellow in our class who was also at KCRW.
Yeah.
We also
Okay, there you
so we had a whole rivalry.
Totally.
But I don't know, maybe one placement I just throw out. And again, every day is different. Every placement's really different. Sometimes your placement throws you a huge project that's hey, you have 4 weeks, answer this question. Good luck. We'll see you in 4 weeks, right? Other times your placement's hey, actually you don't have to do too much work. Just follow me around and learn from me. And that's cool too. Totally different type of experience. So I don't know, the first one that comes to mind is as an example of the latter type of placement, my labor placement was at the Iron Workers, Local 416. Folks that do rebar on generally large construction buildings that are using union labor. So that was really cool. I showed up at some placements are really intense in terms of hours and time. Australia was describing, maybe times you're working very, very long days, typically a political campaign placement or others. This placement was showed up at 7 a.m. every day in Norwalk, which is really far away from where I lived. Sort of followed one of the organizers around for the whole day, met a bunch of iron workers, saw how things worked, and then we'd go home at 2 or 3. And that was when else in my life am I going to get such visibility into how the building trades, the iron workers?
Can you speak to that a little more? So can you talk about a few lessons that you learned just that you wouldn't have known about labor before going into it?
Yeah, I think so learn a lot about labor, about construction in particular, what types of projects are using union labor versus not, the challenges that union labor faces in the building trades in terms of increasing the pool of projects that are using labor, and the specific tactics they use to try to go about getting more folks to use union labor versus non-union labor, and just getting a window into what their membership is what they care about, how if you're an organizer, you have to interact with your membership to try to keep them engaged in the union and help the union feel valuable to them. Sort of a lot of lessons and learning along those lines.
Right. That's perfect. So then can you tell us more about your personal life during Coro? So getting to know 11 other bright and brilliant fellows who are coming at the same issues that you are. Living situation in LA, how did you afford things here? How did you pay the tuition? Can you give us some more insight into that?
Yeah, so I ended up living with another fellow. So there were 2 of us. We found a place in Lincoln Heights in Los Angeles, which is a more affordable neighborhood. We're not living in Beverly Hills or anything. Tuition, I borrowed money from family, so I was very lucky to be in that position where I was able to borrow it, pay it back later. And You don't get a lot of money each month. That's not, I mean, the point isn't to be, comfortable necessarily. And so you learn to make do with whatever you have, right? So I don't think I bought anything new the entire time I was in Coro. You take advantage of any sort of free food that you can get. You ask to have sit-downs and meals with other people, either through the Coro network or through your placements. And sometimes they take pity on a poor Coro student. But I did have family help, right? I wasn't in danger of necessarily not being able to pay rent each month. I could cover my basic living expenses, and so that's how I managed to survive through Coro. And living with another Coro fellow, pros and cons. Pros, you get to discuss and dissect what just happened. You have another person to bounce off of. We weren't ever in the same placement at the same time because you're all doing different placements. So you get to share, and you're kind of always engaged. And then the flip side is that you don't have a second outside of Coro unless you leave the house and you have a free weekend, which is not very often. So that's kind of like the flip side, but it does manage costs, so it's much easier. And other people in our group, there were like 5 of them who found a house together. Yeah, that helps save costs as well.
Yeah, I think the dynamics of the class are really interesting. It was like a part of the experience I enjoyed and appreciated much more than I thought I would. Like I didn't realize how much of a sort of central component that would be. I mean, really like getting to go through a lot of deep learning experiences with 11 other amazing people that are like really talented, but also really different from you by design in many, many ways was really, I just found that like extremely enriching, like both professional, like in the learning sense, but also just in the social sense. I mean, you have like most of my class, like we're like 8 or 9 years later now, still like keeps in touch and hangs out a few times a year, gets together all the time, and just like both like we sort of get to continue going on our professional journeys together, and we're also just like friends in our personal lives as well. So that was a really rewarding thing to get out of the experience I didn't expect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you're forced to work with people, regardless of if you end up liking them or not liking them, or remain best friends afterwards or not, the ability to work with people who you don't agree with or who you don't necessarily like on a personal level, you have to learn to be able to set that aside, focus on a goal. How do you get something done? How are you going to make decisions with this person? And to go through a program, I mean, in 9 months, you probably make thousands of decisions that happen, that you have to complete projects, you have to do all this other work, you have to work with your supervisors, work in small groups, large groups. So making thousands of decisions as a group of 12 every day, it's exhausting, but amazing, that's incredible. And I wish so many more people were able to do that.
Right. And so we've talked about the group dynamics. Can you speak to your personal transformation going through Coro?
I think the most important thing for me amongst many changes were that I became much more curious. Like I think getting to have such, again, a wide angle lens on like the different aspects within different sectors and across different sectors and how that all connects, like really opened up my sort of vision and perspective to realize like how much I didn't see and didn't know beforehand about just like broadly the world of public affairs that I found once I like encountered it, I found fascinating. So it sort of like I think really helped spark that like curiosity in me, like what else is out there, right? Like an example I always give is like, one day we just spent the whole day and went and toured like the port of Los Angeles, right? It's like most people in the world, I had not thought about ports for more than 3 seconds in my life. Like, what do I care about a port? It's like, like the ships and containers and like, who cares, right? Like, it was fascinating. And like spending a day, like talking with like port leadership and workers and folks, you're like, oh, this is like both really interesting and a phenomenally important institution for our local economy, for the city of LA, for the country. And so I'm always like, looking for more ports out there, like more. Anytime I see something I've never really heard of, never thought much about, like because of experiences like that, my reaction isn't like, oh, I haven't heard of that, so it must not be interesting or matter. I don't care. My interest is piqued because of having the experience of sort of going through so many things where you had never paid attention to it, pay attention to it, find it fascinating.
Right. Can you speak to that in your career today? So have that curiosity of learning about new things you had no idea even mattered or were relevant. can you apply that to your job today?
And I'd like to add to that because we have some questions coming in from our participants. What are you doing in life after Coro? What was your employment directly after, and where has that led you to where you are as well now?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so sort of to jump off your point about being curious, being exposed to all these other things, and then asking questions about all those other things and trying to figure out what actually is happening in the world. The ability to asking the right questions to figure out what you need to know, I think, has also been very helpful, and something that was a personal transformation. Instead of assuming either that you know everything or that the other person is automatically wrong if they disagree with you, trying to come down to a base level and figure out what's actually going on was a very helpful tool for me. And then right after Coro, I actually worked for Coro for a little bit. So I helped organize some events for the outside world, but also for current fellows. But the first kind of job after that, like you're not a contract worker, was through Coro, was through a Coro connection, through an alum. She had a job, she was leaving it, she pulled me in, she moved on to City Hall, I was working on a campaign, which led to where I'm at now at Equality California, and we're the largest LGBT civil rights organization, statewide organization in the country. And currently I'm doing work on health programming, and I had no idea about health. That was not in my realm of interests. I was all, like students of color and issues around sexual assault. Like I was very much like social justice oriented, didn't really care about anything else. But after you do Coro, I think it prepares you to do almost anything, right? So they put me in this job. They're like, hey, we need someone to help administer these grants around health programming, go. So I had to start learning around Affordable Care Act, which is a big issue right now. I had to learn around, how clinics are connected and operated versus hospitals versus healthcare organizations versus all these other things, and trying to get at a goal of hoping people access more HIV prevention medication. Like that is now a question that I can look at through a Coro lens and think like, okay, well, where does the business angle come into it? Where does insurance angle come into it? Where do direct service providers come into it? We're a nonprofit. How do we partner with other nonprofits? So I really can start to think through problems in a much more multifaceted way than I think I did before Coro, where I would have just, supervisor told me to do something, I'd spit it back out. Right.
Yeah, I think so. I also sort of like tangentially wound up working my first job, which is still my job actually, through Coro for the last almost 8 years now. So one part of the experience is you have a time where you have to go and find your own individual placement, like find an organization or a company or a political office, someone to pay Coro to take you on to do a specific project. So I actually, while I was in Coro, wound up meeting the founder of this organization called Parent Revolution, and getting involved with them just like as a volunteer in like the very few hours I had outside of Coro, like free time, and just really loved the organization of people. So when it came time to figure out the individual projects, like I went to them and pitched them on taking me on board. It was our last month of Coro, like them having me come on board as a Coro project to help them figure out some things. They were very much like startup phase or figuring a lot of things out, need a lot of capacity. So spent my last month of Coro there, and at the end of that, they were like, we don't want you to leave. You can stick around. I was like, yeah, I'm graduating Coro. So I sort of transitioned like directly from working there through Coro to working there
Totally.
right after graduation.
That happens. People from our class too.
And logistically, I want to speak to this a little more. So as fellows start to wrap up their placements, they go through this project period, which is very much what you were describing. And it's where they can really dig into some sort of experience that open their eyes, or that something that they know that they want to fill a gap in their knowledge. And maybe one organization that they met or some topics. So can you all speak to the different focus weeks topics that you studied?
Sure, the focus weeks topics or the projects at the end? That could be both, I guess.
Both, yeah.
Let's see. Well, for our focus week, I know we had a water week, we had a water and innovation week, we had a transportation week, and I guess interestingly enough, I'd never connected this to you, but my first project period was working with Yellow Cab, which is a fascinating look into an industry that is going through a lot of changes and is shrinking pretty rapidly. And my second placement was at the Metropolitan Water District, which was dealing with water and trying to connect millennials to the drought, which is kind of an interesting problem to solve.
Can we blame millennials for the drought?
Absolutely. Blame millennials for
everything.
Exactly. So those are our focus weeks. We also did one around mobility in Hollywood.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, fascinating.
Okay, well, we're going to jump right into the question section now. So we've been collecting your questions as they came in, and we'll let Sarah, who's behind the scenes, field those.
So we have another question about employment after the fellowship, and maybe one of you can answer how this tends to work. You touched on it, Gabe. Does Coro provide employment after your completion of the fellowship? What does that look like?
So I think, so in my experience, the majority, I would say like a vast majority of people who go through Coro wind up getting their next jobs in some way, shape, or form through a connection they made through Coro. So I don't think the organization programmatically, correct me if I'm wrong, has any like specific job placement arm, but the whole thing is sort of like it's not only a job placement arm, but like, I mean, you're meeting, the number of people you're meeting through your placements, you're basically just being constantly, not formally, but informally interviewed by people for a job. Like, I mean, you're just meeting probably hundreds of people at, dozens of organizations that hire people all the time throughout the experience. So it's just a very, very common thing for someone to wind up go and work for someone that they somehow met through one of their many, many Coro
experiences. If it's not one of their placement or project supervisors, which happened, I think maybe a third of my class, it ended up going back to a placement where they were at. If it's not that, it's some other fascinating individual that you met throughout Coro that you pitch yourself to afterwards to get a job. And if it's not that, it's a connection that they know through Coro. I mean, your network of people that you know is like exponentially increased, and then they all know people, right? So you are connected to this really large network. But I think the other thing that Coro prepares you for, in terms, at least especially for me, and coming out of college and like networking was not my thing. I didn't even understand like why it worked and how it worked, and why it was important. Is that Coro gives you those skills if you're willing to like kind of put in the time and effort. And so after Coro, you are prepared to be able to go and sit down and meet with those people because you have sat down and met with leaders before, and you figure out, okay, these are the things that I'm curious about. These are the things that I'm good at. These are the things I'm willing to learn about. So no formal job placement, but you're much more prepared to go out and pitch yourself. And that's what I was doing the summer after Coro. I was finding people or places that I was interested in, saying like, hey, can we stop by? Can I have some coffee? Let's talk. I can help you with these things. And then I literally just showed up the next day at one of the places. I'm like, all right, I'm here. You don't have to pay me right now. And that turned into like, a contract job. Yeah. And so being able to like do it yourself is also, I think, an important part of Coro. It's not necessarily to like carry you through everything. It's like, give you your skills, you go out and attack the world.
Thank you. And there's another question. You talked about this a little bit, Asteria, but maybe you don't have to give your specific numbers, but there's questions about more the financial aspects. So does Coro provide housing? How much money is the stipend? Maybe you can speak a little bit more to that as far as specifics around the financials, as well as any scholarships available.
Sure. So I'll start off specifics. So each fellow, based on financial need, is eligible to receive up to $2,000 per month. So that really helps to offset a lot of the costs of living in LA, like we've talked about, as well as the tuition. And so we've mentioned briefly that tuition to participate in the program is $5,000. But the stipend really does help, and I know that most of our fellows rely on some sort of stipend or financial support like this. So if you want to add into that.
Actually, I'll jump to the next question. How many hours worth of commitment is it typically?
Just a lot. It's a lot. I mean, it really varies depending on like what your placement is. Or, like, is it like no 2 days, no 2 weeks are alike? So like there's a lot of like, there's times when you're like working like 16-hour days, like so for example, like my political campaign placement was in Simi Valley, which is like an hour outside of LA. Yeah, it's like quite far. And like I was like working, and then eventually I just took over and was running the field office in Simi Valley. So like from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and a little later, like every night I'm in this field office in Simi Valley. There was some woman up there who was great, who was a big supporter of the candidate I was working on. So she just let me live in her house. So I didn't have to like drive back and forth.
There you go.
So like I just like lived in Simi Valley for a month and worked like 12, 14-hour days, like 6 days a week, with the 7th day week being a Coro day back in LA. So like that, you have that type of experience. And then I had like the Ironworkers Union placement where I would like 7 to 3 every day. And then you have some Coro stuff on top of it. So it really varies. Like you can't have another job on the side. You can't, like, you don't have room to like structure anything else in your life. Like you will have times when you have free time. It's not an eye baking job for 9 months. Like it's not always crazy. but it will be crazy at times. Those times won't be completely predictable. So you don't have the ability to like maintain another job or like have like a serious ongoing volunteer commitment over the course of the 9 months.
Yeah, it's very challenging. I told all of my friends in LA, I was like, listen, you can invite me to everything you're going to do, assume I will say no, and the times that I can fit it in around Coro, I will greatly appreciate that. But yeah, no, you're working a lot. I mean, my later placement was also, the hours were a little bit kind of shorter and lesser than some of my other placements, but that was the week that we had a focus week around transportation and mobility in Hollywood. We were out there surveying people on the street. Because my placement was a little lighter, I spent a lot of time in Hollywood, like on Hollywood Boulevard, interviewing hundreds of random strangers, and I was able to kind of like pick up that part of the group project Slack, and so you're still working a lot. It's a lot of hours. Specific, certain projects we were up till 3 o'clock in the morning as a group together, staying up late, figuring out a presentation. But it's fun. I mean, Coro is a unique, once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. I don't regret it. And you're exhausted, but it's really exciting.
So we have about 8 minutes left, and I've got quite a few questions coming in. So maybe I'll direct this one to Gabe, and then I'll direct the next one to Estrella.
It'll be a little shorter.
What were some things that you did to prepare for your placement so that you could hit the ground running?
You don't have much time to prepare, to be honest. Like, part of the point of the program is to throw you into things with not much preparation and let you figure it out. So, yeah, like I'd say we often found out the night before, like, where we were going. And all we got was like an envelope with like the name of a placement and an address and a person to go find, and maybe a dress code, I think, normally. But that's, if you're like into being thrown into challenging experiences and having to figure it out, like, this is a program that does that, I think, more than probably any other, or almost any other. If that sort of thing like terrifies you, it's probably not the right program for you.
Right.
Unless you want to work through that fear, in which case it is the right program for you.
Estrella, can you speak to the relationship between the fellows and the program staff and the level of expectation there is between the two parties?
Well, the Coro experience, I think, for us, and it was very much designed for the fellows to be learning together without too much contact with Coro staff. So we didn't have to be involved in kind of any of the stuff that happens in the background to actually make this organization run, because Coro is its own nonprofit, has to do all this other kind of support work. So you're not really in touch with any of that. The person that you have primary contact with is your program, your program trainer. Ours was Sadie. She was the one who helped lead the seminars when you're working, when you're synthesizing, when you're reflecting together, when you're not at your placements. But even then, she is more of a mirror to put up to fellows, to ask questions, to get you to start thinking in different ways, to try and kind of fill in some of your gaps, to give you tools, but not to direct you, not to tell you exactly what to do, how to think, when to get things done, how to get things done. That is all on the fellows. It's very fellow-centered.
More of a philosophical question. Within your own time at Coro, what were some preconceptions or mindsets you had to consciously unlearn to maximize your experience in the program or at your placements?
Oh boy, so many.
Brevity.
Yeah, brevity.
Oh geez, so many. But let's see. One that comes to mind was, before Coro, I was very much everybody's point of view matters, and we should all have equal time and say in making a decision, right? So in the beginning, I was like, okay, this decision by 12 people need to give input, and we all had to value it equally and all this stuff. But after making so many decisions, you learn to appreciate what effectiveness, efficiency, decision-making structures that, maybe all 12 people don't have to be in the room, and how do you actually get things done versus making everybody feel good.
Yeah, I think I came to Coro with like a very political lens. Like, I was very interested in politics growing up, and political campaigns and government was always sort of what a real passion of mine. And so I think like really blowing up the idea that like public affairs is just about politics and government was like a big thing for me. Again, like sort of like a much wider perspective on what public affairs is, and also like as someone who the program is very mixed ideologically, but someone who like comes from more the left, like personally, I think I saw like a lot of the world in like a left versus right paradigm, and like Coro really pushes you to realize how many things like don't fall into that paradigm, and that like while that paradigm is useful in some contexts, it's going to really not serve you well in other contexts.
Yeah.
And so like be able to like put that hat on and take it off as opposed to always wearing that hat was really, really useful.
Great. A more logistical question, and Gabe, you kind of already spoke to this, but maybe just clarifying. From day to day as a Coro Fellow, will you be commuting to different places, or are you working for more than one organization at a time?
Depends. You do a lot of driving. I mean, you're definitely like your placements wind up being all around LA. So some placements you're just at an office all day. Some placements you might be driving around a lot all day, but a lot of driving.
A lot
you
of
get to
driving.
like know the city really well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's super fun to learn all the different neighborhoods, but it's very helpful to have a car.
But you are at one placement at one time. Can you maybe talk about that structure?
Yeah, so for the placements, which are 2 to 4 weeks, depending on how the calendar works, for the most part, you're going to the same placement location. But again, that still matters. You know, I was with the Teamsters for my labor placement, and we would go to different sites and like tour a trash facility in one part of LA County, and then a UPS facility the next day in a different part, a meeting in a totally different part of the city in downtown to talk about football stadiums. You know, like it isn't necessarily just day to day, but there was never a time where I was working from home.
Yeah,
I never had that.
And you do, to clarify specifically, you do get to focus in on that one placement at a time, so you're not responsible to still be in your labor placement while you're transitioning into your business placement.
Yeah.
The organizations and companies come into it knowing that you're there for a set amount of time, which is nice. Any other questions?
Does this fellowship qualify for financial aid or a federal loan?
I'll take that one. No, so since we operate as a nonprofit, and it is a personal choice. It's not like joining into a grad school program or anything like that. There are no federal student loans that apply, but you are definitely able to apply to scholarships or to find personal loans that would apply. And
You're
so,
able to defer your student loans, right?
Yep, there you
That's
go.
what I did.
Right, and so if you have specific questions about that, feel free to reach out to me and I'll share my contact information. All right, well, we're going to wrap up soon. And so I'd like you all to give them one final tip or one takeaway. A lot of them are filling out their essays right now. And so they're thinking of what's next, what's coming up. And actually, I'll pause there for a second. After the applications come in, I do want to explain that really quickly, that we will get in all of the applications on January 18th, and we'll select 36 finalists for each center. Those will be invited to what's called a selection day. So that's an in-person group interview. It's a full day in late March. And then after that, final decisions are made at the end of April. So you're able to plan out your summer and your next opportunity. So any takeaways from you all?
Biggest takeaway I think for me is not being afraid of jumping into the unknown anymore and even enjoying that.
Yeah, I think if you want to be challenged and are excited about the idea of being challenged as much as possible, like, and you're interested broadly in like public affairs and leadership, it's a great place to be.
All right, well, thank you all.
Cool.
Okay.